I created an animated TV show with no animation experience. This is how I did it. So if you're new, welcome. Hi, my name is Leah. I am an actress and I recently created my very own web series combining live action with 2D animated elements. It's called The Drawing is Alive. I've created over a dozen character designs at this point for the show. I just finished uploading episode 6. Right now, I need a little bit more time to work on future episodes. So this Monday, instead of me uploading a new episode, I thought I would give a behind the scenes video to kind of share what goes into the making of the episodes that you see, as well as maybe provide some inspiration to just start creating something new that you haven't done before. I knew nothing about animation going into this. I learned a lot throughout the process, throughout just working on it. Also, if you're new and you haven't seen the series, totally check it out. Consider subscribing too, but never mind that. I'm just glad you're here. Let's get into it. What goes into making an episode? Every single episode is different, but in general, there are 7-ish steps. Also, my pipe is like hissing, so sorry. Please stop. 7 elements. There's the writing, there's the character design, there's the filming, there's the voice acting, there's the editing, there's the animating, and then there's the adding the music. These steps can kind of flip-flop in the order that they happen in, but that's in general the path that I go down when I make an episode. First step is writing. At the core of my writing is a concept that I am extremely fascinated by, and my concept is what happens when our childhood drawings come to life. It's broad, but it's very specific. It's a really awesome sandbox for me to play in as both a writer as well as an actor. It's very open-ended of what can happen in this show. In general, my writing is very, very loose. I just have a clear starting point of the series, and I have an idea in my head of what the ending point is, but I don't actually have anything firm or set in stone of what needs to happen to get there. That sort of flexibility allows me to play, allows me to change my mind, allows me to find for myself what I find is interesting. I'm sure like a professional screenwriter or showrunner would have it very, very much mapped out, but this is just what works for me and keeps the show feeling fresh for me and, gives me inspiration to work on it. Especially if characters that I didn't intend on spending a lot of time with end up really fascinating me, then I can bring them up in more episodes. So I've got a strong concept that I like, then I brainstorm for the episode. I like to entertain a lot of ideas, but in general, I kind of land on something pretty quickly. I usually base an episode based on a character, which can bring new ideas and new conflicts and new experiences to the protagonist, Janie. But once I have the overarching concept and then I have the brainstorm / rough idea for the episode, then I get right into a first draft. I just do this in a Word doc. I don't have final draft. How this should be formatted is it should all be in like Curry or New fonts, and it should all be in a specific screenplay way. But since this is my show and I can do whatever I want, I can really just write however I want. And this is how I write. I have all the episodes all in one document. At the very bottom of the document, I've got like different random ideas that I'm entertaining. I get through a first pass and then I go into a second draft. This pipe is so loud, it's gonna make me freak out. I go into a second draft, I bring it to someone else and get them to give me some feedback. This purpose of the second draft is to take the ideas from the first draft and just find ways to make those ideas stronger. Sometimes writing can turn into a really long process when you're constantly like building something and then tearing it down and then building something and tearing it down. So I like to keep my writing process very efficient and snappy. I'm not tearing things down unless it's absolutely necessary. I'm building something up and then improving upon that. So if there's a joke, I want to find that joke and make it even stronger, or I want to make this idea told even clearer. In general, if I'm tearing a bunch of things down in the second drafts, I need to go back to brainstorming. That's my writing process. After the writing, I go into the character design. Often the character design happens after I've written it, because then I can kind of hear their voice and then picture what I want them to look like. Each character design is different, but I think we're gonna start with this character here. This is Feathers. I draw the initial sketch of the character, and then what I do is I just draw the character in different expressive positions. I try to make each character very different from each other, very different on all levels, from like shape to size, if they're human, if they're not human, if they're an animal, if they're an alien, if they're a monster. I also try to think of what age Janie, the protagonist, was when she drew this drawing. So this is Kat's like concept art. Kat is supposed to be like a 3-year-old's drawing. I wanted to make like really round scribbly shapes and something that doesn't exactly look like a cat. The character design for Creep is a good example. So Creep is a good example for a character who's like also very different from the other characters, like in terms of drawing style. Like I just try to make the character design reflect who the character is. That sounds so obvious. Also, since I have a background in understanding graphology and handwriting analysis, I do use those concepts when I'm creating a character. For Creep, the reason he has these loops, and there's also a reason why his pressure is super like even and a little bit broken. If you look at the line quality, Creep is like the villain of the story, and I wanted to give his character design a really off-putting feeling, so I made like each line be less smooth and sketchy and more like an anxious hand. Like if you look at the line quality of his leg, I also like the idea of giving him lots of like loops, because in graphology, when you have these sort of loops happening, it's like an emotional like tangle. And also when you like repeat the same form over and over again, it's like you're ruminating and you're spiraling. I try to use my knowledge of psychology when it comes to a person creating a graphic form, aka a drawing, but like any sort of graphic form with writing utensil. Another example of like using graphic forms to like tell the story is the character design of Pipsqueak. I really, really love the character of Pipsqueak. And Pipsqueak, his character is really interesting to me because I had no idea what Pipsqueak would look like. If you've never met Pipsqueak before, this is Pipsqueak. I knew that I wanted Pipsqueak to be someone who rode around on a snowmobile while drunk, but I didn't really know exactly what he looked like. And I'm really, really happy with how his character design came out, because although he's a person who struggles with addiction, I wanted to draw him with like round shapes and friendly facial expressions and friendly body language, because he's not supposed to be a bad guy. Also didn't know that he would be missing a leg, and that's just something that I discovered while I was drawing. I think that there is a pattern of like me not being super rigid with my writing also translates to my characters. Like I do kind of like to be surprised by what I come up with. And it was around Christmas time when I had made this, so I also gave him some candy canes. This fucking hissing thing is gonna piss me. Okay, the hissing is mostly stopped. I rambled a lot. All right, next step is filming. I create shot lists to go off of so that the filming can ideally go by quickly and efficiently. In general, I like to keep my shot lists as simple as possible because I don't have a lot of time to put this stuff together. If I have like a bunch of ideas and I'm like, oh, I want all these different shots and angles, it's gonna take me forever to not only film that, but also edit that. I want to be prioritizing just clear storytelling as opposed to overly creative camera work that just ends up not adding as much to the story as I may think it would. This is the shot 2 of episode 3. Take 1, Mark.
I tried. I didn't get the last bit, but...
No, that's perfect.
Gonna reset back again. You need to step on it. Okay, okay.
I usually film with another person. Sometimes I'll film by myself. I get a lot less frustrated when I'm filming with someone else. To me, it doesn't even matter if they have camera experience. I'm like, just having someone else there to make sure that I'm in focus and that the shot, the camera's on my face. I watched 1.5 million YouTube videos on the subject of filming by yourself, but frankly, none of them are actually helpful because my camera doesn't autofocus very well, and next to impossible to set like a manual focus when you're, it doesn't really work for me. It doesn't really work. A few episodes I filmed by myself for sure. I filmed episode 1 by myself. I filmed episode 5 by myself. Episode 4 was completely animated, so I didn't need to film anything. But for the episodes that I filmed completely by myself, it's so frustrating. You're literally doing everything, and on top of that, you need to remember your lines. That's kind of what I ran into in episode 5. Episode 5 was like a super frustrating filming process because I was forgetting my lines because I'm working on all this other shit. Filming part is like my favorite part because I'm an actress. I love creating, but like acting is what I love. So the filming is either incredible or it's a little frustrating because my attention is super divided and then I can't just focus on acting. It's a learning process. I'm getting it done. I'm doing my best. Next step is the voice acting. I either do the voices myself or I find voice actors. It is so much more fun involving other people and having another creative person take your work and add a new perspective to it. Step 1, you gotta find your voice actors. Then I need to pick a voice actor who'd be perfect for the character. I'm really specific about trying to pick people that have very unique voices that won't be too similar to each other. And then with directing my voice actors, what I like to do, I like to have them read the scripts by themselves and then we go line by line. If the line is, "Hi, how are you?" I want them to try that line 3 different ways. So they can say, "Hi, how are you?" "Hi, how are you?" "Hi, how are you?" So I can get 3 different options and I'm giving them the freedom and the independence to interpret the character how they want. I give a lot of freedom to my voice actors because in general, I find that if I try to give a note, because I am so new to directing, my note isn't actually very helpful, especially since a lot of the voice actors that I'm working with, like they're very new to voice acting or they're not even actors at all. I find that I get a better performance when I just tell them to do what they want, as opposed to when I try to control their performance, then I get something that is really inauthentic, as opposed to when I tell them, you know, I want you to do it 3 different ways, however you want. I usually get a better performance in those first 3 takes, even than in the 4th take. When I give them an adjustment, I tell them, "Can you try it this way?" Usually I prefer the first 3 takes, even if I ask them to give me a 4th take. That's just my experience. Step number 5 is the edit itself. First step, I cut it together without the animation. On that first pass, I'll also add any special effects. If there's like a green screen moment that happens, I'm gonna do that before I work on the animation. Then I add the voiceover, I add the voice acting. It's very important for me to add the voice acting before I try to animate anything because I like to animate to their performance that they give. If actor A gives me a performance for this character and actor B gives me a performance for that character, it's gonna be a completely different animation based on the performance that they give me. So I will not animate until I add in the voiceover. Next up, I add in the animation. When I'm working on the animation, the first pass I do, I'm really not precious with it. I just try to get something in, cutting between the different expressions, trying to cut as much as I can on like the words that it makes sense for them to cut on. Like if the line is, "What are you doing?" I'm gonna be like, "What are you doing?" That looks ridiculous, but trying to cut like on words where it makes sense to change expressions on. But in general, in my first animation pass, I am not precious with it. I just need to get something on the page because for me it's a lot easier to edit something rather than being really specific like all the way through it. Like that drives me fucking nuts. I like to go back in and perfect it. Also, I would find that the more I'd edit, the more I'd be able to like copy paste certain kind of sequence loops. I can like select the edit, copy paste, and then when I go back in for the second pass where I'm perfecting things, then I can be a lot more specific and be like, okay, this word needs more emphasis, a bigger expression, or okay, this expression is too much for this line. I'm gonna dial it back a lot. I try to find as many shortcuts as I can while not being lazy and not cutting corners. The last step is picking music to tell the story. I use a lot of classical music because unlike regular background music and lo-fi music, classical music really starts somewhere and ends somewhere completely different. Like it builds or it changes. Right now, I really just have access to Epidemic Sound. Not sponsored. Epidemic Sound, it's fine. I use it and it is really helpful for my purposes, but I wish they had more jazz, like a la Birdman. It doesn't really have the jazz I'm looking for. Anyways, so I use classical music because it's like reliable, tells the story well. If Epidemic Sound wants to sponsor me, you can. So those are the 7 steps of what goes into creating an episode. See you next Monday! Woo!